Welcome back to the news, everybody. I've got three big stories for you. Number one, World of Warcraft. I accidentally got tangled into the news cycle with it. Turns out an estimation that I made by extrapolating some data then got independently confirmed by somebody with sources at the company and a track record of Activision Blizzard leaks. So that's fairly interesting. Also, Toys for Bob, they are getting some freedom. And this is actually pretty damn big news. They essentially had been thrown into the Call of Duty Warzone mine, which meant that really amazing things they previously did, like Spyro Reignited, well, those stopped happening for a while. It does seem there may be a bit of hope there for Toys for Bob. And also Larian, that's our third story. They're being shockingly mature. They are doing what they actually feel is right, which, yes, in fairness, is probably helped by how they have a lot of financial runway, I would imagine, given the massive sales of Baldur's Gate 3, but still, it's the kind of thing that we absolutely want to see. Which can be said for the foe that's going to be slain by today's sponsor. So here's the problem. Data leaks all the time, and just like vultures looking for a meal, data brokers exist to harvest this data, and that means, well, we end up with spam or, of course, worse things. But the good news is, we do have the legal right to be removed from data brokers, but the downside is doing so takes hours, and that is where incogni.com/Bellular News comes in. So they automate the whole process for you, and code Bellular News gets you 60% off an annual plan. When I signed up, they immediately found me in 48 data brokers. They sent 42 takedown requests, 6 were completed instantly, and funny enough, the day all that happened, I had got a message from a recruiter, and it was clearly just spam. And funny enough, in the Incogni dashboard, I could see that my data was on a platform for recruiters. I don't know how it got there, but I certainly didn't want it to be there. And that's a small annoyance. Obviously, we know that these kind of things can get a bit more serious. Whenever there's those big data breaches, the sorts of ones that make the news, the data brokers are out there harvesting it all up. Of course, that means people can then find your information easily on sites like Being Verified, which is really damn creepy. And even if you do a takedown request yourself, well, your data can just be harvested up again. So with Incogni, they take your data down, but then they continually rescan the brokers over time to keep your data off there automatically. So you can give them a shot today at incogni.com/Bellular News, and with code Bellular News, you will get a 60% discount. So thanks to them for supporting the show, and let's get into it. And with that said, let's talk about Toys for Bob. So this is really nice news. That said, man, what's on their website's really funny. I mean, look at this, right? Overwatch, Spyro, Warzone, Crash, Skylanders. Like, it's almost a bit schizo just having Warzone sitting there in the middle. So here's the deal. Back in February, Toys for Bob announced that they are actually going independent. This is following, of course, the acquisition of Activision Blizzard King. Essentially, Toys for Bob are one of the studios that existed under Activision, right? They led Skylanders. That was going well for quite a time, but then the whole Toys to Life or whatever, that kind of went by the wayside. They then got on some really cool projects, but as Call of Duty was just this big lumbering behemoth and continually was having development issues, essentially Activision just pulled every support studio they had, including those freed up by them stopping their publishing agreement for Destiny 2, and they just threw all of that stuff on top of Warzone. And from everything we had been led to believe, this was really bad for the morale of these teams. Especially with Toys for Bob, the way that they worked, they just did not gel with how they were being led by Activision. So ultimately, this appears to be a really good thing. Now, back in February, they said that this was under, good terms, that their owners were being very supportive and helpful in this process, and that they were actually looking into doing some sort of deal with Microsoft for a game. So overall, with their prior work, they did multiple Skylanders games. They actually did plenty before that. I'm just starting a bit more recently. You've got Crash Insane Trilogy, where they did the Switch port, Spyro Reignited, which, of course, just like Crash, which was done by Vicarious Visions, who are now, well, Blizzard Albany, I believe. Yeah, point is, both of those sold absolutely crazy. They then went on to do Crash 4. From what I understand, Crash 4, it sold well. I don't think it made a loss or anything like that, but obviously it was not absolutely crazy insane numbers. And with Crash 4, things would go quiet for a little bit, but Crash would return. They did support for Warzone, support for Modern Warfare 2, for Modern Warfare 3, and Crash Team Rumble, some sort of live service MOBA-ish game that had battle passes. A strange decision, but it does seem like the type of game that obviously the people at Activision kind of would have wanted. Anyway, what's happened with Crash Team Rumble is it's got its final content update. They're not turning the servers off. They've put in a 500 level battle pass that's free and basically includes all the cosmetics that they've done. And that's essentially that for that game. So that's where things have been left. Now that a month has passed, we've got the good news that they've got something going on. This was broke by Windows Central. They basically, they heard from their sources what was going on. And I've got to be honest, I'm pretty damn excited about this. So, Jez Corden's sources were at a town hall meeting where those attending asked the panelists about Toys for Bob. And if my read of the article is correct, Matt Booty was present as one of these panelists. So I've got to assume that it was some sort of larger meeting with like Xbox or Microsoft, something like that. It's reported that the panelists said the leadership of Toys for Bob would be keeping their team together. Matt Booty actually said that this thing of like doing independence this way, this is an option instead of closing studios, and he referenced what they did with Twisted Pixel, which of course is a really good thing. And Matt Booty said, and this is paraphrasing, that Toys for Bob would return to the style of game they are known for. Now, I'm pretty sure that's not going to mean plastic figurines and Skylanders, right? That's going to be some sort of colorful, character-based, maybe platforming sort of game. Thinking about the IP, well, Crash is one option, Spyro's an option, Banjo-Kazooie is another option. I suppose Conker does exist. I really don't think it's going to be Conker, though. What I did pick up on, though, is if you take a look at the message that Toys for Bob put out, they said, so, keep your horns on and your eyes out for more news. I mean, if we think about what characters here have horns, Banjo doesn't have horns, Crash doesn't have horns, Spyro does have horns. So, if we got some sort of new Spyro game in the vein of Reignited, gotta be real, I would be unbelievably hyped for that. Really, Spyro Reignited was a just incredible piece of work. When you actually compare the two games, like, yes, it's a very faithful adaptation, but whenever they did take some creative liberties, even just looking at all of the different unique animations they did, as an example for all of the dragons that you save, like whenever they hatch, just all of that is so damn good. Like the quality of the new creative work that they did was just really incredible. So that is something I'd be really, really excited for. And with Crash, they assisted in the Switch port, but with Spyro Reignited, they led that. Now, way back in the day, like a few years ago, I actually spoke to somebody who was on that team. They did say that just with the quantity of assets that Spyro Reignited had quite a lot of outsourcing going on, but obviously with the actual art being led in-house. So that does kind of tell me that they should have the institutional memory, the strength to do something in Spyro again. I would love that. That being said, they did experience fairly high staff attrition because, funny enough, if you've enjoyed making things like Spyro, you probably didn't like it when you started to be forced to work in Call of Duty. Okay, our next story then, Larian, where they're doing something that seems a little bit counterintuitive, that is maybe not exactly what all of their fans would want, but it's the sort of thing that I think keeps the studio true to itself and ensures that for, the long run, they can actually make really good content. So what happened is their CEO, Sven, he was at GDC, he did a lot of talking there, he also talked with IGN, and later on he talked a little bit with GameSpot, and I just thought that you would find what he said to be really interesting. So, number one, Baldur's Gate 3 DLC. It is something that was obvious, right? Like, anybody would look at Baldur's Gate 3's success and say, more of that, you need to do DLCs, you need to do an expansion, and hell, what about Baldur's Gate 4? This is the biggest thing in the universe. Well, turns out they did start to work on Baldur's Gate 3 DLC. Essentially, the way he put it is, they just kind of felt like that was the dumb thing, right? It was the thing to do, given how successful Baldur's Gate 3 was. But they cancelled it. They broke for Christmas. It seems that leadership did some thinking over that time, realized that the team's heart just wasn't really in it, and, well, it turns out staff were elated when they actually heard the news. Here's a quote: "We don't have any antagonism against Baldur's Gate 4 or DLC, but the heart wasn't there. I'm sure that if they did that DLC, it would have been really good. I'm sure if they did Baldur's Gate 4, it would be really good. But would it be as special? While we would get that, we would be getting that at the cost of maybe a different idea that they would be able to execute on better." So it's that sort of thing where we know that we like Baldur's Gate 3, more Baldur's Gate 3 would be lovely, but if they stay true to themselves and actually make things that they, in their core, are really passionate about, then while we won't get more Baldur's Gate 3, we probably will get more of something that is differently good or perhaps even better. It was really interesting to hear him speak about that. Also, 5th edition. Just 5th edition, the rule set being a little bit of a problem. I mean, obviously, if you played Baldur's Gate 3, you know there's a lot of 5th edition in there, but you also know that it's been kind of bent, right? Where it needs to be bent to actually make it work for a video game. As for what's next then, well, it seems that they'll be having their own ideas for RPG systems, and they do have 2 new project ideas. They have a number of concepts. Before Baldur's Gate 3, they had a game concept that is an RPG to, quote, dwarf them all. Now, speaking to GameSpot, he said that the next project isn't that game, but that it is a step toward that game. And to me, that's pretty damn exciting. It seems like this is a company that is actually on some sort of grand vision, a company that has found the thing that they are uniquely good at, and thinking about this with Baldur's Gate 3, and they're going to be doing something new and different, well, let's think about recruitment. A lot of people, would be exciting to go and work in this studio and to maybe work in some more Baldur's Gate 3, but I think it almost would be more enticing from a staff perspective that, hey, we're going to do something new, different, and eventually working towards some sort of grand vision. Hop on. That could be a very, very exciting prospect for a lot of people in a way that just plugging in to a content farm for Baldur's Gate 3 would not. So that's basically that, and really his justification was this. You could see the team was doing it because everyone felt like we had to do it, but it wasn't really coming for the heart, and we're very much a studio from the heart. That's what's gotten us into misery, and it's also been the reason for our success. And I think looking at that company's history, they're through the misery. The next story is a funny one though, because it is World of Warcraft subscribers, and I suppose with Larian, we've just talked about a company that I suppose doesn't want to be on an infinite content, an infinite content mill for the game that it found a lot of success with. Well, Blizzard Entertainment, their whole thing initially was, let's get a lot of money from World of Warcraft and turn that into Project Titan, and then, have the MMO to succeed the big MMO, but that all kind of went to shit, and Blizzard has had a very interesting 15 or so years. World of Warcraft's subscriber count is one of the things that people have wanted to know about for a very, very, very long time. Since about a decade ago, they stopped reporting those numbers because with Warlords of Draenor, those numbers went up, and then they really went down fast. This is an anxiety that appeared within the World of Warcraft community after the Cataclysm expansion, because Cataclysm was all turbo big hype. World of Warcraft had been at 12.1 million subscribers, all the news was always good, but then from Cataclysm, those numbers just started to decrease. And we saw good times in Mists of Pandaria where, the numbers would bump up a little bit, and that was kind of cool to see, but ultimately they just decided to stop reporting, probably because the news that they had been reporting, the metric that they had been reporting, had mostly been bad news for ages. Now, where we get to today then is very interesting. The last decade of World of Warcraft has been extremely tumultuous. Battle for Azeroth, Shadowlands, they were very, very rough expansions. You've had all the drama, and then of course the delivery with World of Warcraft Classic, and I think a lot of people just want to know what the hell's going on. So here's what happened. There was a GDC panel called 30 Years of World of Warcraft. It was done by Jonathan Haidt, and John is essentially on the highest level of leadership on the Warcraft franchise, not just the MMO, the overall franchise. And that takes us to, this talk. Now, of course, this talk was assisted by slides, and 2 people, actually, one in our Discord and one that I only saw after I made a video on this in my email. They had attended that talk and they sent me images. In fact, those are the images that you're looking at right now. I did a video on it, and this video sort of ended up being the news. So essentially what I was doing was just kind of calling the shots on this graph, which is World of Warcraft subscribers, right? And basically what you see when you zoom into it is Legion was good, BFA not as good, but still pretty good. But BFA, I mean, hey, look at that. It's a little bit of a worse drop off, but then World of Warcraft Classic happens. And it turns out the absolute weakest part in WoW's modern lifetime is that period after Battle for Azeroth. We then, of course, go to Shadowlands. Shadowlands was really helped out by, Classic continuing, you have Anchorage and Naxxramas, all those big things happening. But then Shadowlands, right? And Shadowlands gets assisted by the pandemic because a lot of people are cooped up at home. And then that takes us to the interesting period where in the dotted line, you basically have the numbers that they internally projected. But the full line, well, that's the numbers I actually got. And this is what they call historically high churn. Now remember, World of Warcraft is 1 subscription. With that subscription, you get Classic, you get Modern. Like you can see there, Shadowlands is just kind of falling. Now, the thing is, at this talk, there isn't an image of it, but one of the people that contacted me did say that they found a bit of underperformance with TBC and Wrath Classic. Again, I'm not 100% sure in that. I think what you do see, though, is, even assisted by those Classic projects, it was just cratering. And I think this really speaks to the profound weakness of the Shadowlands expansion. And then there would have been the most terrifying thing for the WoW development team, and that is they did Dragonflight and the bloody thing only just went and undersold. I mean, of course it undersold. Look at everything that went before it, but then also have Dragonflight. Look, Dragonflight's a way better version of WoW. Like, it is better than BFA, it is better than Shadowlands. I think the raid stuff's been great. When you look at the dungeons, I know a lot of people don't like Mythic Plus. I know, like, Asmongold will say on on his stream that he doesn't like Mythic Plus. When you actually look at the numbers, you have now found that by the time we've hit the 3rd season of Dragonflight, Mythic Plus is at its strongest numbers ever, which is quite something. Now, as we go down, we saw his, Jonathan Haidt, that is, his breakdown of why they feel that Shadowlands didn't work. They talk a bit about this churn rate, but then there's the good times, where a mixture of delivering on Dragonflight. With Dragonflight, they said that Dragonflight has had basically better retention than they've had in the past. It hasn't had the best numbers, but it has had the best retention. But then, of course, you see that really, really big spike. Now, a lot of that's going to be Season of Discovery, and also this ends at 2023. That would be pretty shortly after Season of Discovery. So I think the core point here is that this is BlizzCon hype, this is Season of Discovery doing super well, but from the numbers that we've been able to track using the Blizzard API and Raider.io, well, no, like, actually, Dragonflight's doing pretty damn good now as well. That being said, World of Warcraft, now that it is Classic, Season of Discovery, and Modern, it is only just back to where the Legion launch is. And in the video that I made about this, I basically said, so, World of Warcraft as a business, by those numbers, that's really good. But if you're playing World of Warcraft, especially Modern, well, this is a very fragmented player base across 3 products. So even though those numbers might be good, in reality, it doesn't feel as good, because while the World of Warcraft subscription is back to where it was in Legion, the number of people playing Modern WoW is not. Now, then, I basically did some analysis with numbers, and I've basically just got a transcript of what I wrote down for that, okay? So, basically, the TLDR is that the last official numbers that we got were 5.5 million, and then, using that, and then using statements from earnings calls, I tried to work out what was actually going on. It was a fun little process, really. At the time, I knew that the trends were real. I thought that the numbers would be a fun estimate, and I said as much in the video. Now, Blizzard had a past statement about WoW Classic doubling the subscriber base. Now, that actually aligns with the y-axis of this graph up here, bottoming out at 0. And the reasoning there is really simple. You can literally see the sub numbers double with the launch of Classic. So if you take how much they increased and then you minus that from, the point that you do have in that graph, and if that lines up to the bottom of the y-axis, well, if something doubles from 5 million to 10 million, and that doubling is 5 million, and then you subtract 5 million, and you look at the graph, it all lines up. You see that does actually have the y-axis bottoming out at 0. Now, some people got very, very angry at this entire thing. But again, as I would say, if you know what doubling from a point looks like, and then you subtract that difference from that point and you hit 0, that is showing you a y-axis that, that is 0. But I mean, hey, on r/WoW, people lose their minds. And the thing that has changed is independent verification of those numbers. This is where it's interesting. Okay, so Alexander Cope posted this article. I believe it was Jez Corden's sources at Blizzard. He's, again, sourced a few other things, like, with Diablo and some other examples. They picked up on this. They did an article, and basically Jez was interested in this. So he ran my numbers through his sources to ask them if it sounded correct. And they said back to him, roughly, yeah, that's basically what happened. Now, some people pointed out an accuracy in the Windows Central video about how they said it was at PAX instead of GDC. That bit was ultimately human error and crossed wires because there are only 6 people, and I think whoever posted it was up really late or something like that. But basically, the point is, Jess has accurately reported leaks, so he definitely does have sources in there. those sources do seem to validate roughly what I was saying. And as he goes on to say, he talks about the Diablo 4 Collector's Edition, launch window timings, Hearthstone, Death Knight expansion, a few other things. So basically what that does mean is World of Warcraft's about 7 million subscribers there and abouts. And certainly you might look at Mythic Plus stuff and you look at the number of runs or the number of unique characters in those runs and you think, well, it's probably not 7 million people, just evidently they're running Mythic Plus. But at the end of the day, World of Warcraft is one of those games that has a humongous silent majority of players who don't really engage in that shit. Just the people who are leveling characters, collecting things, all of that stuff. And, of course, I was never claiming that modern World of Warcraft had 7.25 million there and abouts subscribers. I was saying that the World of Warcraft subscription overall was, and that is the thing that has been independently verified. Now, obviously, with this, could that still be wrong? Yeah. His sources could be mistaken. Again, he did say sources, that's plural, so that's multiple people. Now, as it is with sources, whatever those sources are saying back to him, well, that's going to be accurate based on wherever that source has the information from. Is that source fully up to date or whatever? Hard to exactly say, but again, given that this is all based on a legit graph that was, a graph that was presented by the, pretty much like one of the top people in the Warcraft franchise. Yeah, to me, it all basically does seem like it fits. It would be interesting to see if there's ever any comment on this topic from Blizzard. I don't think that'll ever happen, but there you go, I suppose. I thought it was worth just including here because, man, it's pretty damn interesting, and I suppose World of Warcraft has got one of those, it's one of those games where so many people have went through its doors that I do think that for most people, the idea of finding out how many subs there are, well, that's pretty interesting. And anyway, I felt happy to go with it on this, our news channel, because that independent verification did come in from somebody that has got multiple sources within the company. And of course, I do, but none of this was ran through them. So yeah, there you go. Take it for what you will. I don't know. I do believe it myself. We'll see. Anyway, that's it for today's video. Interesting stuff for Warcraft. And hey, I cannot wait to see what Larian have got next. And the prospect that there could be another big Spyro game, another Spyro game from Toys for Bob, well, that's actually really damn exciting. So on that good note, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time.